as far as I understand, it's also a sort of it's a bit in French tradition of bookbinding when you have a separate master, separate professional for every step of binding, and
Yes.
they're very strict about keeping this order, and you really wouldn't know other elements of the process. You're specialized in something. In a single process, and then you just wouldn't share your secrets with anybody because they will take your job away from you.
Right, right.
Well, watch trade used to be like that until comparatively recently.
What trade?
Watch trade,
Okay.
like a family used to make only one small part of the mechanism.
So
Imagine that, like 100 families making a single watch, but the result was that the techniques improved so fast, because if you concentrate on one small part, you can make it more precisely, you can make it smaller, you can make it faster. So there are pros and cons.
There are. I mean, when you look at 19th century sort of Victorian leather bindings, they're nearly perfect because one person did the sewing, one person did the gilding, one person did all the leather work, one person did all the tooling, and then another person would put up the end sheets and do whatever finishing to the book was necessary. You know, books that were so cleanly done you could eat off of them. And then it's one of the issues that I face personally. It's also, I think, one of the issues we may all face is that we look at that perfection and execution and think, why can't I do that? Well, that's the reason you can't do that. There are some binders who can do that. There's no doubt about that. The majority of us do something that is maybe a notch or two less than those Victorian bindings. And the Victorian bindings had issues with longevity. Part of the reason the tooling is so crisp and beautiful in them is because the leather is pared so thin.
Yeah.
When you sink a tool into a piece of leather that has some depth to it, it's not as easy to get such a crisp, beautiful tooling on that.
Yeah.
But then the boards will break off over time, or the cords will get fanned so thin when they're laced in. You know, there are problems with it. So I'm sure that you can strike a beautiful intermediary spot between that and something with longevity. And I don't mind if the hand shows in the book. I don't mind if there's evidence of this thing being done by hand. Not that I want it dirty and well done, but.
Gold tooling is definitely one of the processes that takes a lot of time to master and to keep it in working order, because it's like being a musician, because you need to train all the time and you need to keep your skills in well oiled.
Right, right. Yes.
And do you make your books all by yourself? Do you still are you still active in all the stages? You sew, you tool, you work with leather.
Yes, I do. As I said earlier, I have some employees. They work about 2/3 or 3/4 of the week. They're not in the shop today. In fact, since the pandemic, they really haven't been in the shop. They have their own shops in the same building, which is ideal because I can hand them work. They go off to their shop, do it, bring it back, and we go on like that. So I don't necessarily do every bit of a book. I don't sew that much anymore. There's other things I need to do. I do all of the leather work, I do all of the gilding, and I do all of the tooling. But then we don't turn out a lot of books with gilding and tooling. We may turn out a lot of leather books, and some of them may have aspects of that. I did an edition of 40, actually in the end it was 42 cloth bound books that I just finished that had full gilt edges. So that was over 120 edges that I had to do. And you can get to be halfway decent when you're doing that kind of work. It was also the paper on those edges was problematic. It was paper for inkjet printing, and it's kind of soft and pulpy.
Yeah.
So trying to get a good edge on that was not easy. And the first books I did were not as good as the last ones I did, because I kept learning and improving ways to address that kind of paper. So it was a good process to learn. So I can do all of those things, but because I'm spread thin, I'm not a great tooler. I'm not a great gilder. I'm pretty good with leather, but it's rare that you get to do all of that stuff and do it well.
Well, when we discussed how American and European traditions used to be different, in that American tradition was much more open, and in nowadays, when everyone knows everyone, when we can talk to you, and I'm in Moscow, Stepan is in Amsterdam, and you're in Boston.
Pretty neat.
Is there even such a thing as American tradition, European tradition, French tradition? I mean, as an alive entity, not as stylization, doing like they used to, but is there still regional variations in your craft?
I think that's a really good question, Pavel. And it's something I have thought about a lot. I think those differences are certainly breaking down. There's a lot going on across the ocean back and forth with people exchanging ideas and binders starting to write books and put out videos about how they do things. I mean, YouTube University is probably the biggest teacher in the world on bookbinding right now. And some of it's dreck, but some of it is quite useful and informative. It doesn't seem to me to be such a big difference. At the risk of saying something that is improper, I tend to think that some of the French binders might still hold to what we were talking about earlier, where maybe there is one person who is paring the leather, where the binder has forwarded the book. They may still get the leather pared, they may still get the edges gilt. They'll put the leather on themselves, but they may still have another person doing the tooling. I don't know how true that is nowadays. My sense is that in the UK and in the United States, it's pretty much the same. I don't know much about German binders. You guys are the only two Russians I know, so there you go. But I think that is breaking down. I do enjoy seeing the kind of paring knife that a binder will use, because it's going to be an English knife, which is sometimes referred to as a German knife, or it's going to be a Swiss or a French knife, and those two get screwed up. Usually the German or the English knife have a bevel. A true German knife, you can actually flex the blade. When you put it down, you can literally flex the blade, and the blade tends to be semi-hemispherical, semi-rounded, where the English knife is stiff and has a angled blade.
Mhm.
And the Swiss and the French both have rounded edges, but the French usually has a wooden handle attached to it.
Mhm.
And the Swiss is usually just a flat piece of steel.
Mhm.
But you'll see books giving different names to these. And I'm not the expert, so who knows, my names may be screwed up too. But it's just fun to, when you meet a binder for the first time and you see the knife they use, you have somewhat of a sense of what their background might be like, where, where they may have learned what they know at that point. I was trained in an English shop at Harcourt. Harcourt was based on English style. So I use the English / German style knife, but I also have the Swiss knife and I like that a lot too. So there's much less of a difference now, that's for sure.